Hello and welcome back. Now, right off the top, we have to shout out Nick, I'm Not a Motorcycle, Suzuki. 7 goals, 8 assists, 15 points, 7 power play points in a 9-game point streak heading into Saturday night, which is when I'm recording this video. Somehow, he's only 72% owned. So in a shallow league, if you have the ability, go out and scoop up Nick Suzuki. He is red hot, but we do have a couple of other options later in the video from the Montreal Canadiens that you're going to want to stay tuned for. Now, unlike most weeks, I had to put this out on Saturday night, but just like most weeks, we'll look at the schedule, some streaming options, and we'll look at some trending players as we head into week 19. So let's jump right into the schedule. It is a loaded schedule this week, 57 games. You have 19 teams playing 4 games. That's why we're only featuring a couple here, because not all of these are created equal. The light nights are Wednesday and Friday, and possibly Tuesday and Sunday, depending on how you define those. We have a couple really good schedules here. So Buffalo I've listed at the top because they've got the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, which is usually the perfect schedule, but they also have a couple winnable games here. So Anaheim, Montreal, and Columbus, those are all winnable games for the Buffalo Sabres. And if they can get some goaltending from UPL, these could be 3 wins. You could potentially ride that. UPL is around 50% owned in most leagues. And then there's some streaming options from Buffalo that we'll get into in just a second. But that technical best schedule is Columbus. They play Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, all either light nights or close to light nights. They do have a road back-to-back in LA and then in Anaheim, so that is relatively difficult. They do get the easier matchup on the second night of the back-to-back, which is nice. Then they go home for Buffalo and then home against the Rangers. That's going to be a difficult game. Both of these teams have tough games on Sunday, so that may be something that you take into account if you're looking for those points on Sunday. But we also have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday schedule for Chicago. We're not going to look at them in much detail. There are a couple guys we can look at. And then I'm not really going to touch Edmonton because we know the story with Edmonton. They're very top heavy. There's not a lot going on in the bottom 6. And there's, a couple of these games are on the heavier nights, Monday and Saturday. And then the games that are on the light nights, Boston is very difficult. That's going to be a tough game for them. This should be a relatively, not easy game, but a winnable game for them. But this is a less preferable schedule than the other 3, which is why they're located down here. Now, the only team that plays 2 times is San Jose, so you're probably not going to own any of those guys anyway. And then the rest of these teams down here all have 3 games. They have a couple of teams have 1 light night, but I don't think you're going to need to be streaming from these guys. There's enough 4-game weeks to look at. So without further ado, let's get into the best schedule this week, or one of the best, and that is Buffalo. Now, Buffalo, they have a couple of different guys that not necessarily hot, but they have been heating up over the past month or so. We'll start with JJ Peterka. He is pretty hot. 9 points in his last 9 games, 6 goals, 3 assists, and 32 shots, which is really nice shot volume out of him. As we look at his hub, you can see from his trend, he was relatively high, started to slump a little bit, and then has found his game basically back since about a month ago, around the 14th of January. He's 90th percentile in goals per game. He's got 19 goals on the year, which is really nice to see. And the shot volume, 2.8 shots per game, is probably some of the best that you're going to get. Skinner usually shoots the puck as well, maybe Tuck, but those guys are a lot higher owned, whereas Peterka's 18% owned. He is single position, so that is going to hurt a little bit, but I've already gone out and scooped him up in the Fantasy Puck Creators League, where I'm about to go winless in my last 5 weeks. So if you have any advice for me there, please shoot me a comment in the comment section below, because I am absolutely imploding, even though I finally have my full roster for the first time all season. But up next, we also have to take a look at Dylan Cousins. He's a little bit higher owned, 51%. He's dual position eligible, center right wing, 8 points in his last 8 games with 27 shots in that stretch. And you can see from his trend, he's been trending up for most of the season. So basically from the early December period all the way up till now, slowly but steadily climbing. His shot volume is not that bad either, 2.6 shots per game. Goal scoring is a little bit lower. Assists are okay. He does get a hit per game, which is nice to see, but 30 points in 50 games. Maybe not the most prolific player, not quite as hot through stretches as he was last year, where in, I believe it was December, late November, December area, maybe early January, he was getting red hot and was one of the players that you had to own, especially with that Cousins, Quinn, Peterka line. Jack Quinn is a really good option when healthy. He's obviously not healthy anymore, but just for fun, we'll take a look at his file. Very consistent across all of these metrics, and he didn't have a lot of a sample size there. 17 games, 5 goals, 7 assists, 12 points. So really productive, but unfortunately he's out. So keep him in mind for next year. But as we turn now to the goaltending, UPL, I'm not necessarily going to pull up his hub because I don't necessarily want to switch this over, but 53% owned is relatively high, but if you're in a league where he's available, definitely go out and scoop him up. 3 wins in his last 7 games is not great, but 1.74 goals against and a .935 save percentage with a shutout. And he is one of the top 2 or 3 guys in the league with shutouts. I believe Tristan Jarry has 6. I believe UPL has 5, if I'm not mistaken. So he does seem to get those, and his goals against and save percentage is pretty good. So if you're in a categories league, that's where you would probably target him more so than a points league where he's not getting all of those wins. But he is basically a must-own at this point, and he's a guy that Buffalo has to rely on going down the stretch. They're probably out of the playoff push anyway, but if they want to start winning games and building something for next season, they're going to have to do something in net, and he's the guy that's been getting it done more so than Devin Levi or Eric Comrie. So that's going to do it for the Buffalo Sabres ads. Next, let's take a look at the Columbus Blue Jackets, and there's a couple of guys here that we haven't seen in a while. We'll start with Zach Werenski. He was hurt for a big chunk of the season. He's back, he's healthy, and he's been productive. So 5 assists, a power play point, 22 shots in his last 6 games. That's 3.66 shots per game, which is what he is usually known for. You can see here he is extremely good, 99th percentile in terms of shots per game, 2.73. That's really, really high for a defenseman. There's almost no defenseman over 3 shots per game. I believe Dahlin might be the only guy who's above 3 shots per game. So you're getting pretty good shot volume out of Werenski. The assists are really good as well. For some reason, all those shots are not resulting in goals. He's only got 1 on the season. He does get some blocks, 1.7 blocks per game, and his point per game numbers are pretty good at 0.75, and those might continue to increase as he's getting healthier and hopefully finding some chemistry with some of those new players. The younger guys like Fantilli is out, but there are a number of other guys coming up and trying to fill in where some of these older guys have been less productive. But speaking of the older guys, if Boone Jenner is there for you on your wire, he's a must-own. 41% owned right now, dual eligible center left wing, 3 goals, a power play point, 13 shots, and 9 hits in his last 2 games. So you can see here 99th percentile in blocks, 2.14 hits per game, 85th percentile there. Shot volume is really good, 2.86 shots per game, and the goal numbers, 94th percentile in goals, 16 goals in 37 games. The assists aren't there, but the goals are, the shots are, the hits, and the blocks, and he does get power play time. He's got 5 power play points on the year, but he definitely missed some time, so that would factor into that as well. He's a guy that I had at various points this season on different teams. I ended up dropping him for Vincent Trocheck, which was a huge move for my team in the THHL, but I always love owning Boone Jenner. He's a category beast, as you can see here, and he's been trending up since the 4th. So getting healthy, coming back, finding his game, that's exactly what you want to see. But a guy that we haven't talked about, I haven't talked about him all year, even the preseason, Johnny Gaudreau, basically coming back from the dead. 6 assists, 2 power play points, 11 shots in his last 5 games, 94th percentile in assists, and the power play numbers are still relatively good. 13 power play points in 52 games. You're not getting shot volume. It's under 2 shots per game, which isn't horrendous. It's not great, and it's definitely not something that you'd target him for. And the point per game numbers are still not great, especially considering how much money he's making. But maybe, just maybe, this is a sign of life from Johnny Gaudreau. 47% owned, single position left wing. Depending on how desperate you are, I know I was one of those people who went out and threw a flyer on Jonathan Huberdeau, and he started to heat up for a short period of time there. Maybe you do the same thing for Gaudreau, who has been getting it done over his last 5 games. But if you're in a really deep league, this is a guy that I've gone to a couple times over the past 2 years. Igor Chinnikov, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points, 8 hits in his last 7 games, which is a little bit uncharacteristic. He is just a shade under a hit per game. The goal numbers are usually what you're getting out of him, and I would normally expect them on the power play. He hasn't been getting that time. If you're looking for more power play and goal production, you would probably go to Kirill Marchenko, but 87th percentile for Chinakhov in goals. That's what you're mainly owning him for in a deep league. Hopefully that's the best that you can get at 3% owned to get 87th percentile in goal production. If you're getting, 4 or 5 points per goal in a points league, that's one of the main areas where I would look for Chinakhov. And then we can just touch on Marchenko really quickly. Shot volume a little bit better. Goals are a little bit further down, but he is getting more power play points, 8 power play points on the year. A couple blocks, that's not necessarily something you target him for, and he's kind of been up and down. So any of these guys are potentially available. I would take a look at some of these. They're not necessarily the best options. The two that I would definitely look at would be Werenski and Jenner. If they're not available, probably Marchenko or Chinakhov. I'm not a guy who's going to go out there and pick up Johnny Gaudreau with no shot volume and hardly any goals, but just wanted to put that out there because I haven't talked about him all season long, and he's finally doing something, so we got to give him a little bit of credit. Now, speaking of not doing anything all season long, the Chicago Blackhawks do have a relatively decent schedule this week, and there's not a whole lot to choose from. However, they do have Connor Bedard back, which is something to take note of because the two guys who are playing with him are really available. So Philip Kurashev, this is amazing to me, is on a 5-game point streak. So this team is horrendous. They don't score. I've watched some of their games where they go an entire period with hardly any shots on goal, and yet somehow Kurashev has a 5-game point streak, a goal, 6 assists, 7 points in that span. And then, when we pull up his hub, he's not really been that trending up in the right direction until the 4th. So February 4th, he started to trend up, and he's now up to a 67, but he's been as high as a 70 or thereabouts this year. So getting some power play time, getting a couple blocks, getting some assists, and the point per game numbers are not bad. So right around the same area as Johnny Gaudreau, and yet he's 1% owned. So not necessarily the worst pickup that you could have, especially in a deep league, to find a guy who's 1% owned on a 5-game point streak. I would definitely go out and grab him if I'm in a 20-team league or something like that. You also have Nick Foligno, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, a power play point in his last 4 games, and both of these guys are playing with Bedard on line 1 and power play 1. So that's the main reason to grab either of these guys. You're going to get a lot of hits out of Nick Foligno. That's the main party piece for him. 2.38 hits per game. Some power play points there, 7 on the season. Shot volume at just above 2 shots per game. Not necessarily the most offensively prolific guy, but they don't get anything going offensively, and he's at least a veteran who can kind of muck it up and grind his way into some points. So that's hopefully what you're going to get out of him. Obviously, Bedard is probably owned up, but it's nice to have him back. 3 shots per game, 90th percentile in goals. This is a more normal-looking fantasy file, and it's one of the best that they have. So to get the guys riding shotgun with Bedard is probably something that you would want to take note of. But that's going to do it for the teams that we're going to look at. Next, we're going to take a look at some trending players. So trending guys being defined as players who have been improving week over week, basically since February 4th or thereabouts. So now we're looking at the trending players who have been trending up over the last 3 weeks or so, and there's a number of guys that we have to talk about. We're going to start it off with Yuri Slafkovsky. The rookie, the number 1 overall pick, has finally got his game in order. He's finally putting up those numbers and at least giving you a flash of what you can expect in the future. Now, right now, he is completely hot. You can see down here on the trend line from basically mid-December onward, it's been an upward trajectory, a little bit of a downward slope here, but then pretty much straight up. Now a 73 on the completeness rating. He's getting some hits, which is a little bit surprising. Some block shots as well, getting power play time now. And he's currently, as I record this, on a 7-game point streak heading into Saturday. 6 goals, 5 assists, 11 points, and 5 power play points. So 5 of those 9 power play points on the season have come in the last 3 weeks or the last 7 games. So he is a must own right now. He's 45% owned. If he's available on your wire, you definitely want to go out and get him. We mentioned Suzuki off the top. He was red hot, and also Cole Caulfield is red hot, and Cole Caulfield's been hot for at least a month now. So that line, that trio at least, is definitely the most productive players that you can get from Montreal, and definitely somebody you should have your eye on going forward. Now up next, another guy who's red hot is Jake Neighbors of the St. Louis Blues. He's 87th percentile in goals right now, 82nd in power play points, getting 1.64 hits per game and a couple blocks along the way. And you can see his trend line basically since late November, trending up, then going vertical from February 4th onward, Right now, he is currently 7 points in his last 5 games, 4 goals, 3 assists, 4 power play points, getting some time in the top 6 and making it count. So he has been one of the more productive guys that you can pick up from St. Louis. He's only 18% owned. So this is definitely a file that you're going to want to have access to. You can see here, 53 games, 19 goals, 7 assists, so not a crazy amount of assists out of him, which is why he's 36th percentile there. The shot volume could be a little bit better, but in terms of goals, getting some hits and power play points, a lot of those things are keys to some points leagues. So he's definitely a guy that you would want to take a look at or keep an eye on, the generic sayings. For points leagues that have hits and power play points and goals specifically as your targets. So definitely been getting it done lately, even a little bit better of an ad than a guy like Buchnevich. Robert Thomas is red hot, so if you're trying to find somebody who can ride shotgun with Robert Thomas, this would be one of your options. Up next, a little bit more of a deeper league play, Ryan Strome. You can see his trend line is a little bit different, kind of going down towards the end of November into December, staying pretty low, but over the past couple of weeks, rocketing up from a 52 to a 58. And that is on the back of 5 points in his last 4 games, 4 power play points in that span. There's not a whole lot to choose from in terms of Anaheim guys that are producing. He's one of those guys that's getting power play time. He's dual eligible, left wing, right wing. And you can see here, not a whole lot below this point streak, but in the last couple of games, you got an assist, 2 assists, both of those on the power play, 2-goal game, and then another goal down here. And he's getting some shot volume. So in a deeper league, this could be somebody that you can stream on a nice week for Anaheim, but I wouldn't necessarily touch this with a 12-team or 10-team league or anything like that. Just trying to give you some deeper options as well. The next guy we'll be looking at is Mason Marchment. So he is a guy that signed a pretty hefty contract by his standards, I would say, coming over to Dallas after a pretty awesome season in Florida a couple years ago, and it kind of didn't work right off the bat. He's slowly been finding his game, and as you can see here, it's been a little bit of a rocky ride, but it's all in the right direction. Up, down, up, and then a little bit down and lateral, and then from the 4th onward, he's been rocketing up, now close to a 70 in the completeness ratings, 93rd percentile in assists. He's got 27 assists in 53 games, which is really nice to see. He's at exactly 1 hit per game, which is also nice to see, getting a little bit of power play time and some goal production, but this is not even the best part. The best part is he is currently on a 9-game point streak, 4 goals, 9 assists, 13 points, 5 of those on the power play. And you can see here, this is exactly what you want to see. Everything lighting up here. You got goals, you got assists, you got power play, some shot volume, a couple of hits, some 3 hits games here, and some shot blocking a little bit there more recently than some of the other games. But Marchment is relatively ownable at 44%. So in a 12-team league, a 10-team league, he's definitely a guy that you would stream from the Dallas Stars. Maybe not a guy that you would season long hold typically, but if he's going to play like this, you would maybe have to think about it going forward as we're getting closer to playoff time. Now, speaking of point streaks, Anthony Cirelli, 5-game point streak, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points in that 5-game stretch. But if you take a little bit of a further look, he's got 14 points in his last 12, 4 goals, 10 assists in this span. So a lot of assists coming in here, not a lot of power play production, but he does chip in every now and then. He had a 2-goal, 1 assist, 2 power play point game back on January 18th against Minnesota, getting a power play point here against the Islanders. Not necessarily known for that. He's more of a defensive specialist, a middle 6 forward, but he's been really productive, basically going back at least a month now. So this is a longer stretch of play for Cirelli. You can see here his hub is not that impressive. It's very consistent, 68th or 69th percentile in all of these, 63rd in power play production. The blocks is high for a center. To get close to a block per game is relatively high for a center, so that's why that's 92nd percentile. And you can see his trend line. Basically from the 14th, about a month ago, to now, he's gone from a 57 to a 68. So very complete over the past month and very productive in that stretch. He's only 7% owned. So another deep league play. This would probably be preferable to a guy like Ryan Strome. Strome has the dual position eligibility where Cirelli is a center only. So that will factor into your decision. But 30 points in 54 games is not bad. And he is playing sometimes alongside some of those guys that you want access to in Tampa Bay. Same team, different line assignment. Brandon Hagel, he is also red hot. As I'm pulling up his stats, 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points in a 9-game point streak for himself. So he's been extremely productive. He's basically a point per game player, thereabouts 0.93 points per game at the time of recording. And he's got some goal production, 95th percentile in assists, shot volumes slightly under 2.5 shots per game. Power play numbers could be a little bit better, but that's, obviously he's not factoring in on that elite number 1 in the NHL power play. But when he does get a chance, he does chip in on that second unit. And then getting a couple of hits and blocks, not anything that you're going to target him for. But you can see here, he's shot up basically from the 4th, and that is part of that 9-game point streak. So he was relatively productive even without that. Going back to December, right around the same spot that he was at recently, he's jumped up above that now, and he is red hot. So if you have the ability to go out and get him, I would, but this is probably a shallow league play as he is 84% owned. So you can look at it two ways. You could look at it, you can't get Hagel, that's disappointing, but you can go out and get Cirelli. He's 7% owned, and he's got 14 points in his last 12. So it's not 14 points in a 9-game point streak, but it's pretty similar, and the ownership is much nicer for Cirelli. So these are two options. Hagel is dual position, left wing, right wing, so that might factor in as well, but he's obviously less available than a guy like Cirelli. And last and, probably least, Scott Laughton, not the most impressive rating at a 63, but it is ownable. And he's currently on a relatively good stretch. 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, a power play point in his last 3 games. He's currently playing, as I speak right now, in the Outdoor Stadium Series game. I never know how to play those. I don't know if the guys that you expect to score are going to score. Guys like Datsuk used to be able to score in those games. But sometimes it's the grinders that get those big goals in those outdoor games, so it's hard to play. If you're looking at this on Sunday and you're wondering what to do about Rangers Islanders, I really have no information for you. It's kind of a crapshoot. I would probably expect a guy like Jimmy Vesey to score in that game, though, because he's been relatively productive. He might be getting a role in the top 9, top 6, maybe even with Blake Wheeler out. But in terms of Scott Laughton, you're getting a lot of hits, 1.71 hits per game, a couple blocks along the way, 2.15 shots per game, so nothing crazy there. But this is one thing that I'm mentioning because of the fact that his name has been out there in trade rumors. So he may enter into a better situation in the next 3-4 weeks. If he gets traded, that could be something to keep an eye on. I ended up picking up Elias Lindholm a couple weeks before that trade went down, and that's been really beneficial for my team. Obviously, he's not the same player, so it's going to be a little bit different, but I did an analysis last year at the trade deadline, and basically players on average increase their point production by about 22% after the trade deadline. So if you're going to get 22% more scoring out of Scott Laughton and he becomes a 65, 67 in that range on a better team with some better supporting cast on that, not that they don't have supporting cast in Philly, they're a pretty good team right now, but just wanted to bring this to your attention as we enter towards the trade deadline. Just going to take a quick look at the goalie hub. There's a lot of game action this week, so you're not necessarily going to need streamers because most of your guys that you own are going to get the starts that you need to meet your minimum threshold. But as we start, let's look at Stuart Skinner. He's been incredible, basically back since the end of October. The coaching change happened somewhere in this range, and then from there, rocketing up, going a little bit sideways, and then continuing all the way up. And he was now in the top 10 in terms of goalie rankings. He's dipped off a little bit here, down 3.8 from last week. So this could be a little bit of a blip. It obviously couldn't last the way that it was. A 16-game win streak is not going to be something that you can expect all the time. Another thing, Cam Talbot, he's been sliding down this board as well. And you can see here in his file, rocketing up at the beginning of the year, staying pretty hot, and then starting to slowly, and then just kind of crashing down here. That was starting back about a month ago in January, and it's continued. He's still not that great. So just a couple of things to keep in mind as we look at the rest of this. It's going to go a little crazy here because we don't have anybody selected. But if you look over here, Alex Lyon, he was a guy that I picked up because he was red hot and he was basically stealing the starting job in Detroit. And as we pull him up, you can see here kind of going a little bit sideways and then rocketing up in early January all the way up to the end of January, and that's kind of tapered off, and then he's come crashing back down. So now might be a good time to reevaluate your situation if you do own Alex Lyon. As we look at a couple of these other guys, Stolar's still playing really well with a 926 save percentage, so that's really nice to see. Vasilevsky just got lit up. So this does not have tonight's game where they lost 9-2 to Florida. So his stock will continue to drop after that. Igor Shesterkin, an up and down season for him. You can tell that, he was in my buy low video, and at that point he was not doing well. A couple games after that, he did improve, relatively speaking. He went, from a 67 up to a 73, but then it's been back down, back up, back down, and then back up. He had a nice shutout win the other game, but this is a guy that if you want to solidify your goaltending for the playoffs, there's probably an owner out there who will probably get rid of him at this point. So I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a sure thing to be really good down the stretch, but he's an elite goaltender that's usually in the top 10. He's just outside it right now. I believe that's around the 15 mark, but he's a guy that you probably would normally count on, and he improved 6.21 week over week. So that is something to take note of. But as we look a little bit further down, there is one guy that I did want to touch on before we ended that, and that is Nico Daws. So Nico Daws kind of filling in right now. The Devils have had some injuries. I believe Vanacek went down day to day. He wasn't very good anyway. You can see if I pull it down here, we have to look to see where Vanacek is, but he's nowhere near the top. Here's Schmid all the way down at a 31. I believe Vanacek might be a little bit higher just because of the fact that he's been getting more starts. But yeah, Vanacek not doing well this year at all. But you can see here, Nico Daws at a 44. He doesn't get a lot of starts, obviously. He's just started to play. But 5 wins, 2.9 goals against, 909 save percentage. He is above expected. And you can see him rocketing up over the past couple of games from a 28 to a 43. So if he is going to be a temporary goaltender for the Devils, this is a guy that you probably want to pick up. He is currently 18% owned. He's got 2 wins in his last 3 starts. He's currently playing as I'm speaking right now, but his last 3 starts before this, a 9.64, 9.38, and a 9.31 save percentage. So if the Devils are going to make a run for the playoffs, which I assume they will now that Jack Hughes is healthy and they're getting a lot more of their guys back and ready to go. Dougie Hamilton's still out, which is disappointing. But if they're going to make a playoff push, they need somebody in the net to just give them a chance. And if that's Nico Daws, it may not be. But if it is, this is a guy that you can get out in front of at 18% ownership right now. So that's going to do it for the goaltending section, and that's going to do it for the video. I didn't want to go too in detail with the goaltending because there isn't a lot that you need to do this week. There's a lot of goaltending starts that you'll have, but hopefully this video was insightful and gave you something to think about as we head towards our fantasy trade deadlines and our fantasy playoffs. So if you have anything lingering that you want to ask me, questions about trades, questions about playoffs and things like that, leave them in the comments below. I'll try to get to them as soon as I can. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.